the vast chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with tension. Representatives of a dozen species, each distinct in form and temperament, raised their voices in a cacophony of overlapping arguments. Holographic displays flickered, showing star maps dotted with territories lost to the relentless advance of the Zarkan Empire. The Council had been convening for hours, desperately seeking a solution to the war that had ravaged their galaxy for decades. A massive, lizard-like Rhizorian pounded his clawed fist on the table, demanding an all-out attack, while a delicate, insectoid Therian diplomat clicked her mandibles, advocating for a defensive strategy to protect the remaining unscathed systems. "Enough," boomed the voice of the Council speaker, a stately luminar with glowing eyes and skin that shimmered with stress. The room quieted, but tension hung thick in the air. "We must find a way to end this war before it consumes us all." The displays switched to a recent battlefield, a once thriving planet now a wasteland of ash and twisted metal. The Zarkan, a race of bioengineered conquerors, had shown no mercy, obliterating entire civilizations with their advanced technology. They were an empire built on the ruins of others, expanding their territory with brutal efficiency. No one had been able to stand against them for long. The devastation was unimaginable, and each species represented had suffered losses. The Enorians had lost 3 homeworlds, the Scarans had seen their fleets shattered, and the Vorthi, once a proud warrior race, had been reduced to scattered refugees. It was clear to all that if something didn't change, the Zarkan would soon be unstoppable. Amidst this chaos, humanity had remained conspicuously absent from the conflict. The other species had been waiting, watching. Humans were the wild card, the species that had risen from their small blue planet to become a significant force in the galaxy in record time. Their ships, while not the most advanced, were innovative, and their strategies unpredictable. But it wasn't just their technology, it was their sheer adaptability and refusal to surrender, their capacity to turn even the bleakest situations into victories. Stories of human tenacity and ingenuity were whispered in the corridors of power, of their ability to outthink and outfight opponents many times stronger. Yet, despite all this, humanity had chosen not to engage in the war. The reasons were a matter of speculation and debate. Some believed they were simply waiting for the right moment to strike, to ensure the best possible outcome for themselves. Others thought they feared the Zarkan, unwilling to risk their newfound place in the galactic order. But the truth was, humanity had deemed the war a lost cause from the beginning, and they had no interest in becoming cannon fodder for a battle they hadn't started. As the debate raged on, the chamber dimmed unexpectedly, and a palpable silence fell over the council. From the shadows at the room's edge, a figure emerged. Clad in flowing robes of dark, iridescent fabric, a member of the Tari stood before them. The Tari were an ancient, mysterious race, rarely seen and even less understood. Their presence in the council chamber was almost unheard of, a sign of how dire the situation had become. The figure raised a slender, multi-jointed arm, its eyes glowing with an inner light that seemed to pierce through the gathered representatives. "Do not involve humans in this war," the Tari's voice echoed, resonating through the chamber as if spoken from all directions at once. "The consequences will be catastrophic. Their nature is not like ours. They will not fight like us. If you bring them into this conflict, you will unleash a force that none of you can control." A murmur spread through the assembly. The Tari were known for their cryptic warnings, their insights into the deeper currents of the universe. But even among the most skeptical, there was a sense of unease. The council speaker leaned forward, his expression grave. "What do you mean?" he asked cautiously. "Are you saying the humans would turn against us?" The Tari shook its head slowly. "No. But they will change the war. They will change everything. Once unleashed, they cannot be stopped. The Zarkan will fall, yes. But the cost," it paused, its gaze sweeping the room, "will be beyond your imagining." The room erupted into heated discussions. Some dismissed the warning as baseless fearmongering, arguing that the Tari's prophecies were too vague to be of use. "What could they do that we haven't already tried?" scoffed the Rhizorian, his scales bristling with disdain. "We need every ally we can get." Others, however, were not so sure. The Vorthi ambassador, a battered veteran who had lost his entire fleet to the Zarkan, nodded slowly. Humans are unpredictable. I've seen what they're capable of. If the Tari are warning us, we should listen. The debate dragged on, but no consensus was reached. The Tari watched silently for a moment longer, then turned and vanished into the shadows from which it had come, leaving the council to their arguments. The Zarkan throne room, nestled deep within the core of their sprawling capital ship, was a fortress of shadows and cold metal. The Zarkan Emperor, a towering figure with a crown of sharp, bioluminescent spikes, sat in silence, his reptilian eyes fixed on the holographic map of the galaxy before him. The war, which had seemed so promising in its early stages, had stagnated. The Galactic Alliance, despite their fractured alliances, had managed to hold the line. The Emperor's advisors, a cadre of battle-hardened generals and strategists, stood around him, their voices low and filled with frustration. "The alliance is weak," one of the generals hissed, his scaled hand slamming down on the console. "They bicker among themselves. We should have crushed them by now." Another advisor, her eyes narrow and calculating, shook her head. "They are weak, yes, but they are desperate. That makes them dangerous. They've fortified their core worlds. Our forces are spread too thin to break through without incurring unacceptable losses." The Emperor leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "What of the humans?" His voice was like the hiss of steam escaping from a fissure. The room fell silent. The humans had been the subject of much debate among the Zarkan leadership. Their rapid rise and unpredictable nature made them a potential threat. And yet, they had remained on the sidelines, watching the galaxy burn while they fortified their own territories. "They are an enigma, my lord," one of the strategists said cautiously. "Their fleets are small but highly advanced. They are different. If they join the war, they could tip the balance." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "Then we must ensure they do not join the alliance." He paused, his mind calculating the possibilities. "But we cannot allow them to remain neutral either. Their strength grows unchecked while we are engaged on too many fronts. If they decide to turn against us, it could be disastrous." A silence followed his words, heavy with unspoken agreement. The humans could not be ignored any longer. The Emperor leaned back, his mind racing. A plan was forming, one that would either secure their victory or lead to the humans' destruction. He turned to his advisors, his lips curling into a cruel smile. "We will give them no choice." The plan they devised was simple yet brutal. The Zarkan would strike at humanity's colonies, but they would do so under the guise of one of the other galactic factions. The attacks would be swift, leaving no survivors to tell the tale, no evidence of Zarkan involvement. The goal was to provoke the humans into retaliating against the supposed aggressors, dragging them into the conflict. The humans would be so blinded by rage that they would not realize the deception until it was too late. A list of targets was drawn up, isolated colonies on the fringes of human space, outposts with minimal defenses but significant civilian populations. The Zarkan forces chosen for the operation were elite units, trained in covert warfare and equipped with technology designed to mimic the weapons of other factions. They would strike swiftly and without mercy, leaving only devastation in their wake. The first attack came without warning. A peaceful human colony on the edge of the Trident cluster, known for its lush fields and vibrant community, was reduced to a smoking ruin in less than an hour. The Zarkan ships, disguised with holographic projectors to resemble the vessels of a notorious pirate group, rained destruction upon the colony's surface. Buildings crumbled, fires raged, and thousands of lives were snuffed out before the human defense forces could even respond. The attackers vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving behind only chaos and confusion. News of the massacre spread quickly through human space. Images of the charred remains, of the bodies lying in the streets, flooded the human media channels. Outrage boiled over. The human governments were furious, but they were also cautious. They knew that being drawn into a war could be catastrophic, especially if it was under false pretenses. But the people demanded action. Protests erupted on Earth and the core worlds, calling for retribution against the supposed attackers. Human intelligence agencies worked tirelessly, analyzing the debris and the weapon signatures left behind. The evidence pointed to the pirate group, but there were inconsistencies, gaps that suggested something more sinister. The human leadership, wary of making a hasty decision, issued a series of stern warnings to the suspected factions, demanding they cease their aggression or face dire consequences. But the Zarkan were not deterred. The Emperor, watching from his throne room, saw the hesitation in the humans' response and decided to escalate. A second attack was ordered, this time on a more prominent target, a bustling trade outpost with a significant civilian presence. Disguised once again, the Zarkan forces struck with ruthless precision. The station's defenses crumbled under the assault, and the attackers moved through the corridors, leaving no one alive. This time, the human response was swifter. Fleet mobilizations, increased patrols, and a message to the galaxy: humanity would not tolerate further aggression. But even as they strengthened their borders, there was a growing sense of unease. They were being pushed, prodded toward a conflict they did not want, and the enemy remained elusive. The Zarkan watched, satisfied. The humans were on the brink. One more push, one more atrocity, and they would be dragged into the war, their neutrality shattered. And once they were involved, the galaxy would burn in the fires of a conflict unlike any it had ever seen. The Emperor leaned back, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. The humans would soon learn that their place in the galaxy was not to remain above the fray. They would be drawn into the darkness, and when they finally realized the truth, it would be too late. The chamber of the United Human Council on Earth was filled with a palpable tension. The emergency session had been called in the wake of the recent attacks on their colonies, and the atmosphere was thick with urgency and barely contained rage. Representatives from every major human colony, military leaders, and high-ranking officials from Earth sat around a massive, circular table, holographic projections of the destroyed colonies hovering in the air above them. The room buzzed with anger and fear, a storm of emotions threatening to spill over at any moment. Admiral Reyes, a towering figure in his dark uniform, stood first. His voice was hard, edged with the kind of resolve that came from decades of battle experience. We have been attacked, unprovoked, and innocent lives have been lost. If we do not respond, we show weakness. The galaxy will think we are afraid, that we can be pushed around. I say we strike back, hard and fast, and show them what it means to provoke humanity. There were nods of agreement from some quarters, but others looked wary. Ambassador Liang, a senior diplomat known for her cool-headedness, raised her hand. Admiral, we all feel the pain of these losses, but we cannot rush into a war. We don't even know who is truly behind these attacks. The evidence is circumstantial at best. We cannot let our anger cloud our judgment and play into the hands of those who wish to see us destroyed. The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, some supporting the ambassador's caution, others backing the admiral's call for action. The council chairperson, a stern-faced woman named President Olivetti, banged her gavel, calling for order. We will have order, she commanded, her voice echoing through the chamber. The room quieted, though the tension remained. General Castor, head of the Human Defense Forces, leaned forward, his voice a gravelly growl. We have analyzed the attack signatures. They were disguised, yes, but there are patterns, techniques that point to the Zarkan Empire. If we wait, if we hesitate, they will strike again. We need to hit them now, while they're still underestimating us. But what if this is what they want? Interjected Dr. Marquez, a civilian strategist. What if the attacks are a provocation, a trap to draw us into the war? We have maintained our neutrality for a reason. Entering this war could lead to catastrophic consequences, not just for us but for the entire galaxy. The Tari warning. Screw the Tari warning, a young representative shouted from across the table. They're not the ones losing their families. We've tried to stay out of this war, and what has it brought us? Dead colonists. Destroyed outposts. We cannot stand by any longer. The debate raged on, with voices raised and fists pounding on the table. There were those who argued for revenge, their faces red with anger, recounting the lives lost and the pain of the survivors. They spoke of humanity's duty to protect its own, to avenge the fallen, and to show the galaxy that they would not be cowed by terror. Others, like Ambassador Liang, cautioned against a hasty response, warning of the dangers of falling into a conflict that could spiral out of control. They argued that humanity's strength lay in its ability to think, to strategize, and not to be goaded into action by rage alone. The fear of a broader, more destructive war loomed over their words, a shadow that silenced many. But the pressure from the public was immense. Across human space, there were protests, demands for justice. People were angry, afraid, and looking to their leaders for answers, for action. The weight of these expectations bore down on the council members, adding to the already immense strain. Then, in the midst of this heated debate, a new report flashed across the room's communication screens. A human transport ship, the Aurora Dawn, carrying hundreds of families from the frontier worlds, had been destroyed. The image of the wreckage, floating in the void, sent a collective gasp through the room. The Zarkin had struck again, and this time, the target was not a colony or an outpost, but a ship full of civilians, children, parents, entire families, obliterated. The room fell into a stunned silence, the weight of the tragedy pressing down on them like a physical force. For a moment, no one spoke, the enormity of the loss hanging in the air. Then, slowly, the murmurs began, growing louder and more insistent. The calls for action, for vengeance, became a roar. President Olivetti stood, her face pale but determined. We cannot ignore this any longer. This was not an attack on a military target. This was an attack on humanity itself. The Zarkin have made their intentions clear. They will not stop until we are dragged into this war, one way or another. There were nods of agreement, the previous hesitation melting away in the face of this new atrocity. We must act, she continued, her voice steady. We will not be drawn in blindly, but we cannot stand by while our people are slaughtered. We will prepare for war. The vote was taken, and the decision was made. Humanity would enter the war. The military was mobilized, fleets prepared, and alliances long dormant were reactivated. The gears of war, which had been held in check for so long, began to turn. The next day, a message was broadcast to the entire galaxy. President Olivetti's face appeared on screens in every corner of known space. Her voice was calm but firm, her eyes hard with determination. To the people of the galaxy, we say this: humanity has been attacked, unprovoked and unjustified. We have sought peace, but peace has been denied us. We will not stand idly by as our people are murdered. To those responsible, know this: humanity is coming. And we will have justice. The message was clear, the intent unmistakable. Humanity had been pushed to the brink, and now, they would push back. The galaxy watched, some in fear, others in anticipation, as the most unpredictable force in the universe prepared to unleash its fury. The Zarkin military base floated in the depths of space, a heavily fortified stronghold that had withstood countless assaults over the years. It was a critical hub for the Empire, supplying fleets, coordinating attacks, and serving as a symbol of their unshakable power. But all of that changed in an instant. Without warning, the base was plunged into chaos. Alarms blared as the human fleet emerged from hyperspace, their ships sleek and deadly, unlike anything the Zarkin had ever faced. The humans didn't follow the usual protocols of battle, there were no warnings, no posturing, just a sudden, brutal strike. The human ships moved with terrifying precision, weaving through the Zarkin defenses with an agility that defied belief. They deployed swarms of small, nimble drones that bypassed the traditional defense systems and targeted the base's weak points with pinpoint accuracy. Before the Zarkin commanders could react, the humans had already disabled the base's main shields and taken out several key weapon systems. Zarkin ships scrambled to respond, but they were met with a barrage of human weaponry that seemed to come from all directions at once. The humans employed energy weapons that disrupted Zarkin electronics, and their missiles were equipped with adaptive warheads that adjusted to counter the enemy's defenses in real time. The Zarkin ships were torn apart, their crews watching in horror as the human ships moved through their ranks with ruthless efficiency. The shock of the attack rippled through the Zarkan ranks. They had been expecting a conventional battle, the kind they were accustomed to, but this was something entirely different. The humans fought like they had nothing to lose, their attacks relentless and unforgiving. The base's command center was a flurry of panicked activity, officers shouting orders, trying to make sense of the assault that was tearing them apart. But it wasn't just the technology that threw the Zarkan into disarray, it was the way the humans fought. They used tactics the Zarkan had never encountered, deploying ships in erratic formations, using decoys and traps to lure the Zarkan into deadly ambushes. They hacked into the base's communication systems, broadcasting taunts and misinformation that sowed confusion and fear among the defenders. The humans didn't just target the base's defenses, they attacked its morale. They used psychological warfare, broadcasting images of the destruction they had wrought on other Zarkan installations, reminding the defenders that they were not invincible. The Zarkan, used to being the hunters, found themselves hunted, their every move anticipated and countered. The Galactic Council watched the unfolding battle with a mix of awe and trepidation. They had heard of humanity's prowess in combat, but this was the first time they had seen it on such a scale. The Zarkan, who had been terrorizing the galaxy for years, were being dismantled with a brutal efficiency that left many in the Council uneasy. Some factions were relieved, seeing in humanity a force that could finally turn the tide against the Zarkan. They watched with hope as the human ships pressed the attack, their weapons cutting through the Zarkan defenses like a hot knife through butter. The once feared Zarkan fleet was in full retreat, their ships exploding in bright bursts of light as the humans pressed their advantage. But others in the Council were not so sure. They had warned against involving humanity in the war, and now they saw why. The humans were terrifying in their efficiency, their willingness to do whatever it took to win. There were whispers of fear, of what might happen if humanity, having defeated the Zarkan, turned their attention to the rest of the galaxy. Back in the Zarkan Empire, the leadership was in turmoil. The Emperor's advisors, usually so confident and composed, were pale and trembling. Reports flooded in from the front lines, each one more disastrous than the last. They had underestimated humanity, dismissed them as a minor threat, and now they were paying the price. The Zarkan struggled to adapt, but the humans were unlike any enemy they had faced before. The Empire's usual strategies, overwhelming force, terror tactics, had no effect on the humans, who responded with an unpredictable ferocity that left the Zarkan reeling. The Emperor, once so sure of victory, now found himself staring at the very real possibility of defeat. And then came the turning point. In a remote sector of space, a massive Zarkan fleet, one of their best and brightest, prepared to engage a smaller human force. They outnumbered the humans 3-1 and were confident of victory. But the humans had learned of the Zarkan's plans and had set a trap of their own. As the Zarkan fleet advanced, the humans unleashed a barrage of advanced weapons that tore through the Zarkan ships like paper. They used cloaked vessels to flank the Zarkan, launching a surprise attack that shattered the fleet's cohesion. The Zarkan, caught off guard and overwhelmed, were annihilated. It was a decisive victory, one that sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The Zarkan fleet, which had been poised to strike at the heart of human territory, was gone. The Zarkan, for so long the dominant force in the galaxy, were in retreat. And humanity, the species the Council had been warned to keep out of the war, had just turned the tide. The galaxy watched, stunned, as the humans broadcast their victory. Their message was clear: they were not just joining the war, they were here to win it. And now, everyone knew, the Zarkan were not just fighting for domination. They were fighting for survival. The Zarkan Empire, once the terror of the galaxy, was reduced to a desperate shadow of its former self. Their fleets shattered, their worlds in chaos, they made one last stand. A colossal armada, the remnants of their might, gathered around their homeworld. It was a final, defiant act against the inevitable. The human forces arrived swiftly, their presence overwhelming. There was no more hesitation, no more diplomacy, only the cold, calculated precision of a species that had been pushed too far. The battle was brutal and short. The Zarkan ships, battered and demoralized, crumbled under the relentless human assault. The emperor watched in horror as his empire fell apart around him. With his forces decimated and his people crying out for an end, he did the only thing left to him: he surrendered. Human envoys arrived on the war-torn Zarkan homeworld, accepting the emperor's unconditional surrender. It was a moment that would be etched into the annals of galactic history. The war, which had raged for years and claimed countless lives, was finally over. But the consequences were only just beginning to unfold. The Tari, the ancient race who had warned the galaxy of the dangers of involving humans, looked on in silence. Their prophecy had been fulfilled in a way that no one had fully understood. Humans had indeed brought catastrophe, not just to the Zarkan, but to the very fabric of galactic society. The old order had been shattered, and in its place, something new and uncertain was emerging. Some species hailed the humans as liberators, their arrival a turning point that saved countless lives and ended the Zarkan's tyranny. They spoke of alliances and new beginnings, of a galaxy where peace might finally have a chance. But others were not so sure. They saw in humanity's rise a new threat, one that could be even more dangerous than the Zarkan ever were. The fear was not of conquest, but of the unknown, of what humanity might do with its newfound power. The Galactic Council reconvened in the aftermath of the war, but it was a very different body than before. The chamber, once filled with fierce debates and rivalries, now echoed with a cautious silence. Humanity, represented by its newly appointed delegates, loomed large over the proceedings. Their influence was undeniable, their presence a constant reminder of the price of underestimating them. New treaties were drafted, alliances forged in the heat of war were formalized. But there were cracks beneath the surface, tensions that simmered just below the veneer of cooperation. Some factions feared human dominance, others sought to align themselves with this powerful new force. The galaxy, for so long divided, was now united in uncertainty. As the dust settled, the question of humanity's future in the galaxy loomed large. They had proven their strength, their resilience, but at what cost? A broadcast, beamed across the stars, posed the question that everyone was asking: what would humanity do next? A human voice spoke, calm and resolute, reflecting on all that had happened. They spoke of the sacrifices made, the lives lost, and the new responsibility that had been thrust upon them. Humanity was now a central power, a force that could shape the destiny of the galaxy. But they were also a species still finding their way in a vast, complex universe. The broadcast ended with a simple statement, one that left the galaxy in a state of uneasy anticipation: we came into this war seeking peace. We will not stop until it is achieved. But know this: we will never allow ourselves to be pushed to the brink again. And with that, the future stretched out before them, a vast, uncharted territory filled with both promise and peril. The galaxy had been warned to keep humans out of the war. Now, they would have to learn to live with the consequences of ignoring that warning.